good morning or afternoon, wherever it is where you are. This is kind of like a continuation, even if you want to call it part two of the work that I've done on the interior of the Land Speed car. I left off where I was on the other side changing the AEM location and the wiring and stuff, but one of the projects, part of the project was on this was relocated the seat, which that was in the previous video, and lowered it and set it back a little bit. But the other thing was the window net bar and release. I didn't like it the way I had it because it was kind of like homemade. I ended up using a seatbelt buckle, cut the strap off from it, and but anyway, it was too difficult. So I came up with this idea, and this works really good. All it is, piece of 3/8 rod. I'm gonna have to put this back together because I took it apart. But basically, and this holds the net in place too. You just have to slide this in through the back three. And we don't care how easy it is right now because it doesn't come off. And that all goes together like that. And the front one slides over the front, and you got this arm down that drops down inside. So basically I stick it in the rear mount, and this spring holds it in place. And anybody on the outside that's helping me just slides this back and drops it into the hole. So it can be done from the outside, of course, like if Forrest or Brooke is helping me get in and out of the car, they would do this for me. But now, sitting in my seat, I've just got to reach up and pull this. The hole in the back here is way oversized. This is 3/8. So that basically it just falls away, and it's much better than the one I had built first, and I like this much more. And the other part that I finished up on this, it's not finished yet. We'll go to the other side. The AEM location of the ECU. So we from here. Oh, we should have put it. Could raise this up a bit. Yeah, anyway, going from that small project to this small project, the AEM ECU used to be down on the tunnel, and it was we had to have a wire coming up for data logging, but now everything is right here. You hook into the computer, data log. We keep the stick here on a piece of Velcro, and you can just plug it directly in. I've still got to clean up this wiring. I don't like it. Injector relays, I've got that tied off to the roll cage here, but it cleaned up the dash, got rid of some of the wiring and stuff up there, made it a lot nicer and not down where it's going to get kicked if I put the passenger seat back in, which I do on occasion. So, yep, that is basically the end of what I was doing on the inside. And the other day, the video ended, I had, if we want to work to the front. Yeah, where I left off the other day, because I finished up the inside like we were just talking, and then I worked my way out to here. And I ended up pulling everything apart on the previous video down to the point where I was ready to take the turbo out, the one that was in here. But in order to do that, I had to put it up on the lift because the 2 bolts you have to get from underneath. So what I want to do now is go through what I've done since then, because I got the turbo out, and because we got the new turbo in the 7875, which is a lot bigger. And what I've done is kind of set this up mocked it up, everything. So what we're going to do is take this apart, what I've done, and show you how everything is mocked up at this point, which was all the inlet piping, I mean, everything, to make sure everything fit, including even the outlet of the, get that out of the way.
So most of this, what you see on top here, is the same as it was before. As far as the intake, you're seeing the intake manifold that we've been running for, I don't know,
The very beginning.
since well, yeah, that's right, because once with
Yeah.
the 16 valve had to have
Right.
this
Yeah.
with the original throttle body.
Yeah.
So this has been here for quite a while. So just keep that in mind when Gramp takes this off and you see how much turbo is now stuffed underneath there.
Yeah. So we're going to pull the charge line off here, which is sometimes a little difficult.
And this goes to a air to water intercooler, which the original intercooler, of course, would have been a air to air, which I don't know if you can see it down in there, but it's an air to water unit that fits in the nose, just like the air to air did.
Yeah, the 4-inch air intake to the compressor, I ended up cutting a hole down through the apron. I don't know if you can see that, not down there. So this comes out with a 45, a 90, and right straight down through. So it's within probably 8 inches off the ground. So you've got the coolest air you could possibly put through this thing coming into this thing.
It's only got a couple bolts holding the
Yeah.
manifold on, just because it's on and off, on and off, on and off. Going through the process of.
I would have videoed this whole process, but it was a lot of, like Forrest is just saying, on and off, over to the bench, build a bracket, bend the bracket a little bit, put it back in. I actually had an engine hoist with a 1.25 by 1.25 square tubing stuck out like this, with it hanging here until I got it to this position with brackets on it. So that, let me pull this off, and as I explain it, you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. But yeah, see, there's a last bracket I took. I took off the water neck, and there's a bracket down in here that is attached to the cover where the balance shaft used to be. So this thing is pretty solid. And when I pull this engine out to finish up, because the exhaust for the inlet, the crossover and the inlet, I'm going to do with this engine set on a jig that I made out of wood on my roll around steel bench. And I'll do that out. The outlet to the turbo, the downpipe, we're going to do in here because it's so close. There's very little that we have to deal with. We're going to use the original pipe. Part of the crossover from over on the exhaust side from the header, we're going to use part of that, but everything else will be new to this point.
So to put this in perspective, the turbo that just came out, the outlet, this was right here. So the VS Racing 7875 that we're gonna run this year, try out this year, is drastically forward and in a different spot, namely because it's so big.
Yeah.
It's hard to fit in this space, but Gramp has worked on getting it set up in there. So it's a good, I don't know, 8 inches forward of where the one was from last year, the 6762. And then, of course, the original turbos all sat right here also with an outlet in downpipe pretty much in the same
Similar configuration.
Similar spot. So this is a pretty drastically different spot for the turbo where it's been in the last couple of years anyways.
Well, it's not only, it made the outlet of the compressor a nice spot because the pipe we had used to come out around and go back.
Yeah, the compressor would be here, and you'll see. We'll show you the other turbos. It
Yeah.
used to have a 90 to point straight out the front, so then we could make a turn over to the intercooler.
It's putting it a turbo this size inside this small car. It's not like, you know, when people rebuild the whole front end, make tubular front, and they mount it out here. In this class, you know, we can't do that. We have to have the nose the way that it is. We have to have headlights, the original fascia. Everything has to be, you can't block the radiator. You have the same size radiator. So you're limited. So it's quite a job to fit this back in this little tiny spot and then get all the piping to it. Yeah, just put it in perspective, looking at that turbo and how that fits in there. What I'm going to do is I'll grab the other original Porsche turbo, the K26, that actually came out of this car that was in the car when it was built, and give you some idea of the difference. It is kind of comical to look at it. And this is it. If you look at the inlet to the compressor end, it is quite comical on the outlet. Compared to what we're working with now, it's quite different.
Go ahead and hold it where it would have been in the original position.
This would have been, let me make sure I got this right. It would have been, I believe, like...
Really? It was like that?
Let me think.
Man, it's been so long, I don't remember.
I know, and I don't know if these have been reclocked or not, but I remember this came out of, it was something like this, I believe, or I don't remember. That thing's heavy. But anyway, that was in there.
Well, I was just going to say, if you literally take it and then
oh yeah,
stick it like
kind
that.
Kind of funny. It is pretty comical.
Just look at it.
But they managed to get 220 horsepower out of it. Yeah, I'll get it.
So yeah, the 7875 from VS. So it's a billet 7875 journal bearing, oil only, no coolant, with it's a dual V band. So it's got a 3.5 inch V band on the out. It's got a 3-inch V band on the in, which is good. We already have 3.5 inch exhaust we did last year, and the up pipe is 3-inch already. We had necked it down to 2.5 for the 6762 VS billet from last year. So a little bit of modifications to get that in there.
Yeah, it was a challenge. I probably have, I don't know, 12 hours or so to get to this point. There's a lot of backup, and just like I was talking to Forrest earlier, you've got 4 connections you're dealing with. And you've got dealing with heat, keeping it away from things you don't want hot.
Yeah.
Before, everything was right near the brake booster right here, and there's a cover that goes over this, a heat shield. And I had to alter that a little bit to get this in from the last turbo. And I always worried about the heat from it. But then again, because you're out on an open runway doing 167 miles an hour and down, so you've got a lot of air passing through. So how it would affect it, I don't know. This is not like driving it on the street on a hot day and you've got exhaust going through. I don't know if it would affect it, but you know, I don't want to take any chance. If I can get the guard back in there, I will. But now it moves the heat to the front, right under the intake, which I'm going to get a blanket for this anyway. I have one for the one we just took out, or the one I just took out, but it won't fit this. But I'm going to get a heat blanket for this because it will fit down in here quite nice. This brace won't be here, of course, and the brace underneath here won't be here. And this is oil in and oil out at the bottom. The oil return to the crankcase is in a lot better place than it was on the last turbo. I had an awful time fitting that in there. And last year I took on way too much on this thing. So we were kind of cramped at the end of it for time. And this year kind of cut back and just doing the turbo extra fuel pump at this point, which I'll try to do some videos on that. The next thing that I've got to do is I'm leaving this right in here. I am not unbolting it or anything to take the engine out, because the engine drops out through the bottom and it's not in the way. I can get it out through all right. And I'm going to drop the engine out of it and get it set up on my roll around bench on the jig that I have, and do the exhaust for the inlet to the turbo. And at that point, once that's all done, then it'll end up, I got to put the engine on the engine stand, roll it over, pull the oil pan off from it, because we think we had a rear main seal leaking because of crankcase pressure, something that we've just started dealing with this last year. So we've got to make corrections there. We're going to put a new main seal in it, plus pull some rod bearing caps off and check the rod bearings. If you got it apart and out, you might as well do that. There's no sense taking any chances, especially we're pushing this thing up over 7,000 RPM.
Oh yeah, and potentially this year, of course, with that big a turbo and the hopefully lack of back pressure.
Yeah,
we've back pressure. We've had plenty of the last couple of years, and that's the reason for going such a drastically big turbo from the 67, 62. We thought that we were gonna grow into that, but of course we don't really know what we're doing either. So we haven't fooled around with turbo cars before. We just make kind of educated guesses and what have you. But I'll be honest, I'll take the blame on that. I thought we were going to grow into the 67, 62, but we still were doing 2.5 to 1 back pressure ratios, up to 3, depending on how hot the EGTs got. Sometimes we crept up on 1,700 degrees Fahrenheit. So we were just stacking exhaust ahead of the turbine.
terrible.
Awful. So we couldn't run as much power as we wanted to because of that. So we ran out of injector first, put bigger injectors in it, and then we just ran into the heat problem again. We got to the same problem again. So if you're wondering why we went with such a big turbo for this size engine, being a 2.5 and change-ish.
2.56 to be exact.
That's why. It's because we just don't want to deal with the heat anymore. We've been dancing with disaster as far as the EGTs. We don't want to, torch this head. They're not exactly easy heads to find anymore. And there's a lot, there's a fair amount of money in the head already with valves and springs and all that machine work. So
a lot.
We'd like to save the long block. We just went drastic. And one of the reasons why we went 78, 75, and I pushed Dad again to go for it, but we watched Richard Holdner. We really enjoy watching Richard Holdner, and we like his just simple,
actual
testing and simple explanation about things. And, he runs a K24. Now, this is not a K24 that revs to $9,000. But I think 85 actually, maybe 9,000. But anyways, it's not a Honda motor, but still it's about the same size. It's 16 valve, configuration. And he runs a, 78, 75 with it was a 125.
125.
Yeah, 125 AR on the turbine. And made plenty of good power. And he actually, he noted that the back pressure wasn't there, but it would spin that turbo and make boost. So
the thing was, though, in watching that and looking at the graphs, it didn't create boost until up around starting to really build boost, 7,000 to 8,000 RPM. So Forrest and I talked
I think it was around $5,000 it actually started to build.
Yeah,
but it didn't make full boost until up there.
Right.
Yeah.
And we didn't want to go an AR that big. And then when he put it on the
4.8,
4.3 or 8, whatever it was.
Yep.
And every time he did that, because you're talking bigger volume of air, because we're talking about moving air, that boost rise was dropped down each time. So that being said, in talking with Forrest, decided to go to the 1.01 AR.
Yeah.
Because we didn't want to get caught with finding ourselves not making boost at all until 8,000 RPM that we couldn't get to.
Right. Which, so we went to 101 AR on this, so it should come in a little earlier. But the nice thing about it, about the boost coming in late on this car too, is, this isn't a drag car; it's a land speed car. So we've got time that we're holding it under load and building a lot of heat energy in the exhaust, which we can take advantage of with that big turbine. So. And the other thing with that too is we're not snappy and making a bunch of torque down low, which also saves the drive line in the car, the transaxle and stuff, because we're, the turbos so far we've had, they make 20 pounds like instantly. Even the 67, 62 made 20 pounds.
Too early, I think.
Really quickly.
It was
we could make 20 pounds, before 4,000 RPM, I think, because we had the boost, the boost controller. Yes, of course, electronic boost controller. We had that duty cycle on that was only like 18% or something like that on a 40 millimeter wastegate, and we were making 20 pounds in the late 3000s, early 4000s.
Came up really too fast.
It came up too fast. It was great because it was like a drag race. Still, you got to get up to speed, but then we were just, and then
the first 3/4 of a mile. By the end of the mile, we got there in a hurry. But after that,
we just fall. We just go out of. We would just blow through the efficiency range of that turbo, and when it really started to matter in those high gears under high load, we just weren't making any more power. And actually, we're losing power because we were getting so much heat in the exhaust. And
you weren't getting the exhaust through the turbine end.
Yep, we were just packing it up before the turbine. So that's why the big jump, the 78, 75. It's going to be a great experiment to see how this.
I'm anxious right now.
What this makes for power and how it builds boost, because it's a big one compared to what we've been running. So that's the project, and Gramp's going to be working on figuring the rest of this out, and then I'll be coming in to do the finish welding on stuff, what have you. Gramp usually gets everything ready and cut and fit and stuff like that, and then I come in and just do the finish welding on things.
I get everything tacked and fitted, and then Forrest comes in and weld it all up. And I'm not permanently mounting this. What am I hitting on this? It's turned down.
It turned down.
I don't permanently mount the turbo until all the piping's in place, welded up, cooled off, and then build a mount for it.
Yeah.
Because you've got so much give and take on this stainless steel, especially you get into 3.5 inch. And we know how that
it moves, it shrinks.
Yeah, even on the header on the other side, that 1.5 10 stainless steel.
It shrinks.
A lot of movement. So you can't do anything permanent until you get everything done, clamped up, and then build them out. Yeah. And even at that, you're going to get movement.
Yeah.
One of the things that is surprising, and we may hit that threshold, is I don't know if I want to call it underestimating the flow through the 16 valve head, because this was a NA engine that this came off from. It was not a turbo engine, and it was just an NA, and everything was it was more injector. But long story short, at this point, it's going to be interesting to see what this head does with this bigger turbo, with more air going through this thing, to see if we start ending up, also the manifold, to see if we end up with, between charge and boost pressure, if we start to get a differential there. Because right now, I think Forrest told me we only got about a pound.
Yeah, so it's about a pound. Right now, we're running about a pound differential from charge pressure. What he means by that is the pressure right out of the turbo, and then the boost pressure, and these are the sensors that we have and how it's set up in the ECU. So charge is right at the outlet of the turbo, and boost pressure is the MAP signal, so the manifold air pressure. So we look at the differential between those to understand the efficiencies or inefficiencies of the intercooler and throttle body system. Because if we see a higher differential between those two, it's either the intercooler or the throttle body. It's one or the other, because they're the restrictions in that section of the system. which I keep on thinking, I keep on thinking the throttle body is going to be the limiter because it's original and it's only 60 millimeters or 50.
I can't remember.
I'd
have to measure.
I think it's 60, 65 millimeters.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking this time it's going to be the limiting factor with the amount of air that in the how efficiently this compressor can move air, but it's hard telling. So and it's a stock 16 valve cylinder head, and this thing the ports. This thing is not ported or anything. It's just got factory ports on it. Nothing's been touched on the intakes or exhaust. It has had a valve job and valves and springs put in it, but that's about it. And honestly, we can't even tell you what the valve job is on it. We were talking about it earlier. We don't know if it's a single angle valve job or three angle valve job.
Yeah, I don't remember, but I got the thing back from the last shop and I didn't like the leak down test. I ended up taking it completely off again. And I went through all 16 valves and hand lapped them and then turned around and I think in another video I had mentioned this about some beehive springs that were on those modular Fords. Did a lot of measuring and research and finally nailed it down to these modular springs. They're on a Ford modular beehive and they fit almost perfect. Smaller valve that I set them all up and they're all within a pound, all 16 of them of 85 pounds
And
installed pressure.
Yeah, and the reason why he did that is to get more seat pressure and more open pressure so that we can rev the thing harder, and also more valve control with the beehive spring. The beehive spring is essentially a lighter spring because it necks at the top. The retainer is smaller and everything.
Oh yeah, this had dual springs in it originally.
Yeah, and there were the original springs too. So they had seen some time, so it was worth the upgrade to lighten up the valve system, lighten up the spring, the inertia of the valve system, right? Reduce the weight of the spring there, and also the beehive gives you better control because of it's almost like a variable rate spring.
And the funny part is, though, I think I tested one of the original springs that came out of this, and it was only like 35 pounds.
Seat pressure? Oh man, that's pretty light.
I can't remember. I had set it up just for my own satisfaction. Only 35 pounds.
Yeah.
But not only that, though, is having lapped every single one of these valves in, I set up this vacuum test system, you might say, and I set up a benchmark of what I wanted to be is how long that valve would hold vacuum. It was quite a process. But through all of that, when I finally got it all back together and it was still on the bench and leak down test was less than 1% across all four of them, which is pretty good. I was pretty happy with that. Some of them was 0, which it seems impossible, but leak down tester is a leak down tester. It's a built-in correction factor, if you will. But yeah, I had less than 1% leak down on all 4 cylinders, so I figured I got something right for a novice. So, but it's been fun. I enjoy doing it, especially like this, putting this turbo in here. Sometimes you have to walk away from it and think about it. And, the biggest thing is this car is so low. Having it on the lift, I can get it up to where I don't have to bend over and stand on my head. But now at this point, I'm down to pulling the engine out and continue on the exhaust. I'm ready for a donut. You ready?
Yep.
Up we go. This is where the crossover goes through and up through here. That's what I'm going to do when I get it out on the bench. Like I say, when I pull this out, this cross member and everything is going to be still on the engine. All this stuff has to come off. So it's going to be just like it came down out of here. So I can build all of this knowing where my limitations are as far as room. So no big deal. This is the original down pipe.
Well, original as of last year.
As of last year, yeah.
Yeah.
I built all of this. Forrest welded it up for me all the way to the back. It's a straight pipe right now.
Yeah.
I do have a muffler fitted that I can use when I put it on the road. But yeah, all this will come down together. All the lower control arm stuff got to come out, which I'll do a video on what I'm going to do to get all of this out of here, because it requires, to get this out of here, it requires being set on my roll-around steel working bench on this jig I made for this, which is out of wood, made out of wood, which some people would find that kind of funny. But the thing is, with wood, it doesn't slide around. I don't have to worry about this engine sliding off some steel structure. And it's got to be so you can move it, because you've got to get it out of get the thing off the bell housing and stuff, because it's got a torque tube you have to disconnect it from, go forward, and then bring it down. So
you can see the torque tube up in, that's the torque tube up in there, which goes, there you go. So you can see the tube connects to the bell housing, and then there's a shaft in here that goes back to the transaxle, because of course the transmission's in the back of this car, being a transaxle.
Limited slip. And it's involved, but I've done it so many times now.
And then you can get you up in here, and you can see the
that's where I
steering.
gotta go.
You can see the steering shaft here, and the up pipe's got to fit up between the steering shaft and hit the turbo there, and then the down pipe's got to come out of this area here to then hit up with the down pipe over here, which we think we might upsize this year for a little short run, because now we got such a big turbine. We'll go with a 4-inch out of there, maybe, as long as we can fit it. Get you back down out of there, and come down into this area down here somewhere, just to give us a little more expansion capability, coming right out of the turbo. And
to get the 3.5 in here. Of course, if you want to bring that back here, Forrest, I had to build, which I don't know if but I built a shatter shield for the flywheel, which takes up room on this side. But over on this side, I actually ended up modifying the rear control arm mount and reinforced it, welded a piece of plate up in there, and basically reinforced, just to get this clearance here, because there's not much movement there, because I've got this thing. But this is 3.5. And I don't think to get 4, I don't think we can get 4 down through there. Not unless I really modified the bell housing or flywheel shield, which I
think it's all right. Just if we got a short section, just to allow the gas coming out of the turbine to have a place to expand and then cool by the time it hits the 3.5 section down here. What added performance, I don't know, but it makes me feel better. I guess. So there it is. Oh, here's the air to water intercooler that's tucked up in the original spot. So you can actually see it pretty well. So you got the fittings and the two water lines that are there that run down up into the fender.
That was a challenge all by itself. But it's worked well.
There it is.
That's that part. And well, we can go over a lot of this stuff once I get it out on the bench. The trigger wheel and
you got
stuff like that.
Tack weld in there from when it slipped.
That was hard to believe.
Oh yeah, and actually that cues right into the next thing. So the timing slipped and this thing went nuclear. We almost burnt the car down on the dyno, which we've talked about before. So they had a MIG welder there, and I welded our reluctor wheel to the serpentine accessory drive pulley when we were there. Just came down in and put a weld in there, and that
Let's
actually,
show them the expansion joint that had the meltdown.
so when this thing went nuclear on the dyno, that's what happened. We had this expansion joint in the crossover. We can go look at this.
Yep.
So from the outlet of the header here, we came across and then back up in. That's what this, so this used to sit here. And the idea is where we had such a long up pipe, and the distance from the elbow where it would be here to all the way up to where that would be on the turbo was a big lever. And we were worried the expansion between this point here and over here, the expansion rate of the material, trying to spread everything apart, we were worried about cracking things. So I told Dad we should really put an expansion joint in there, which is still valid. It's still a good idea. But the problem is when you lose timing on the car and the thing gets so hot that it does that, it really doesn't help anymore. So this actually ballooned all the way out and pushed the up pipe against this side, red. Pushed against there, and I mean it was about to melt off.
But the thing was that not only when I got the thing back here, I said I got to do something about that. I got to pull this thing back together, so I had to repair this.
Oh yeah, these tabs were after. Yeah.
And I've got anyway. I had a stainless steel plate so that when it crossed it with 1/4-inch bolts, it would nylock nuts. Even though a nylock nut's got to hold this in place so it wouldn't, move. But our last runs up to Loring, if you can see this, there was so much back pressure in this side of the exhaust that it actually was forcing this apart, and when it did, it wouldn't give here, and it actually bent those tabs, including the pipe, back into this part of the expansion joint. That's how much back pressure there was, because this being hot. So basically it wanted to collapse this, and that's what it did. That's why it's so distorted. And that was from the back pressure and the heat. But the damage to the inside was the original heat from the timing going out of whack.
Yeah, so we had 50 to 60 pounds back pressure on a 3-inch pipe. 2 pi r 1.5. Let's do some math real quick.
Yeah, what's a square cross-sectional square?
That times pi times 60. So we had about 424 pounds force
on that expansion joint, and all the rest of it for that matter.
424 pounds force on that joint with it super hot. So things do move when you have that much pressure on them.
Yeah, and in the turbo, because the hot end, it was the problem. It was just too small. Matter of fact, let's show them the opening in that. This is the last one we took off, and it's just not big enough.
Yeah, so this is the 6762.
Yeah.
So 67 compressor, 62 millimeter. And then this was a 1.1 also.
This is a 101.
This is a 101
But
also. Yeah, but the housing's pretty small.
Yeah.
And then this was the one before that. This is the Lindsay Racing Super 75, which is a K26-8 exhaust, which is even tinier. And then it just has a bigger compressor housing on it. And then, of course, there was the original K26-6.
We have quite a collection of turbos
which you can see is the same as
pretty much
the same. It's a little bit wider in the throat, just a little bit wider in the throat.
Yeah, but this was bought as a direct bolt up because I didn't get into it like where I am now, which is where I am now is where I really want to be. This bolt-on stuff, you buy it from somebody that does race at Lindsay Racing, as far as everything bolts in place and ECU chips and so on and so forth. After that one round, I decided that's not where I wanted to be. It just didn't have control. not enough information for feedback, such EGTs and everything else that put on the car for information. Because all that information has improved the car, led us to where we are now with it and the decisions that we've made. So.